Okay, we are recording. Today I am really, really excited. I feel a little bit like Oprah. I had to schedule my next guest. This was exciting. I had to schedule my next guest a couple of months in advance. My people had to call her people. That's how busy she is. So today I have Antoinette Perez with Keller Williams, and I actually printed out all the things that she's done. I'm going to let her tell you in a second what she's done, but just a couple of highlights. Antoinette is a Keller Williams Master Faculty Instructor. Been with KW for about 15 years, maybe a little bit more. She's also a facilitator, coach, consultant, and an author. I read that you co-authored The Essential Pregnancy Organizer and The Essential Baby Organizer, so I want to talk about that. That's super cool. You've also been a dog foster parent.
That's right.
And you were, or maybe you still are, a member of the Austin Flute Society.
Not for quite a while.
That's pretty cool. But I think above all, you're probably the most proud of being a wife and a mother, knowing you a little bit. And so I just want to welcome you to my show. I don't even know what to call this yet, but anyway, welcome. So how you doing? And maybe fill in some blanks. Maybe I'm sure I left some things out.
Thank you for having your people call my people, Mark.
No problem.
And getting this set up. I'm excited to be here. A little bit of background is, I started out my professional career right out of college and affiliated with Gary Keller's mortgage company here in Austin. So after having been there for about 4 or 5 years, I joined Keller Williams International for about 3 years on staff. I initially started working in IT, and then after the first couple of years, really started focusing on teaching the technology to our agents, and eventually moved over into the university full-time. So I've been really focused on teaching for most of the last 13 years or so.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
I met Antoinette a few months ago. You taught a class in Los Angeles on Train the Presenter, and I nicknamed you the Velvet Scalpel because the way that you could just get in there and cut out little pieces. It was I think I told you when we met. I've been in city and county government, and I've given presentations to hostile city councils, and I've made presentations to Board of Supervisors and other groups that may or may not have been hostile at the time. And I have to admit that I was more nervous in your class presenting to my peers than I remember being in front of some of those other groups. So if you could take us through what you do, and I know you do a lot of adult continuing education or continuing learning. Take us through that, and then let's talk about fear and how you got some great ideas for overcoming fear when we're making a presentation.
Yeah, I would say probably about 70% of the work that I do is helping other people with their public speaking and communication skills. Actually, if you put communication in there that's not public speaking, it's probably 95% of the work that I do.
Right.
But it is a particular area of focus for me because I do feel like if I go back and look at the pivotal moments in my own life and my own career, they almost always boil down to messages that did or didn't get sent or received well. So communication, public speaking is of huge, huge interest to me. I really enjoy working with folks on those skills. I like reading about these things. I like geeking out over them. And then I like really helping people see past some of their own perspectives around things and to really embrace not only the areas where they can improve, but all the things that they already do well. A lot of people come to public speaking with a core set of skills and natural abilities that really do serve them well. I think that sometimes people fear the scalpel, as you say, this idea of really breaking down all of the components of their communication skills because they're afraid of all of the things they're doing wrong, when in fact I think there's a lot that people do right naturally.
Right. And you were really fantastic at pointing out what we did right and combine that with what we did wrong. So you mentioned when you were just talking about some areas in your life going back that maybe you either did or did not communicate well. Can you give us a couple examples of what those were and maybe what you learned from them? Maybe something that you felt like you didn't communicate well and how you learned from that?
Yeah, I feel like, in sharing the stories, there's one that comes to mind right now, and knowing that I haven't gotten permission from the other person to share the specifics, I can kind of share with you in generalities. During these feedback sessions with presenters, sometimes things can feel very emotionally elevated and escalated. And it's rare, but every once in a while someone will hear feedback and really not take it well at all. And interestingly, over probably, I would say 11 years now that I focused on helping people with their public speaking skills, I found that when people's emotions get really elevated during those feedback sessions, my ability to reassure them that we're maintaining a safe environment and that we've got to stay focused on action orientation and feedback that helps us to learn, and that it's constructive, that those kinds of things I'm way better now than I was back in the old days. I can't think of one that I failed spectacularly at. I'm sure that I had my moments of people getting defensive and me scratching my head going, what do I do next time? But something did happen just last year where I felt like my ability to diffuse the emotion to some degree, kind of take the negative charge out of it and still to deliver the message that I would have delivered anyway was far improved. So yeah, I'm like everybody else, just working on getting better every day.
That's great. That's great. And your feedback. If you're watching this, you happen to stumble upon this, or you watch this, and Antoinette gives a class, I highly, highly recommend that you take it. You don't have to be with Keller Williams, and you don't even have to be in the real estate business.
That's true.
Take the class, because it was 2 days of I want to say intense, but it was relaxed. I mean, but at the same time, it was intense in that I think all of us in there were probably some high Ds and drivers and people that really want to do a good job, and it was a great class. So I suggest that they take that class. So I'm the productivity coach here in La Quinta, so I work with a lot of agents, not necessarily new, who have a real fear of making a presentation, and typically the presentation is a one-on-one or one-on-two listing or a buyer presentation, and they're just very, very fearful. Can you give us some tips for communicating better in those situations, and then how to overcome some fear? I know you gave us some great tips when we were in that class. How to overcome fear if you're afraid to step into that situation and make that presentation.
Right on. I'm glad you brought it back to this. You mentioned earlier that agents do present all the time. We do. Actually,
every day.
In this world, we are all presenting every day.
Right.
Sometimes those presentations are very casual and they're unscripted, and that's fine. That's often very appropriate for the situation. But I have found that, certainly in the real estate business, and then back before that when I was in the mortgage business, that loan officers as well were sometimes hesitant about those presentations they would give to, in the loan officer's case, borrowers, and then, of course, in real estate agents' case, buyers and sellers.
Right.
And I do believe that one of the biggest reasons why, especially for new agents, is this fear that we're not going to be able to answer all the questions.
Yes.
So if we can tightly control what we say and not leave any room for questions, then we won't make mistakes and we won't have errors. I've also seen people that walk into those kinds of situations, sometimes purposefully underprepared, so that they have an excuse for not being able to do their best in that situation. When it comes to anxiety in general, I think that preparation is the key to everything. And then once we get the preparation down, we've committed to doing the work in preparation. Practice is the other part of it. I believe that for a public speaking gig, it's a lot easier to justify the practice. For an everyday salesperson, to think about practicing your presentation can feel just off, and I still think it helps. The idea here is not to memorize every single word and to control the interaction tightly. It's so that we feel confident.
Right.
That's the number one anxiety, kind of anxiety minimizing technique that I would have to say is just preparing and practicing.
I completely agree with you. I believe that preparation overcomes so many fears. When you practice. How important are scripts in our business, and how important are learning those scripts in overcoming fear, do you think?
Scripts are fascinating to me from a human behavior perspective.
Me too.
Yeah, I bet for you too.
Yeah.
I think they're critical, and people who resist scripts often, sometimes I think, underestimate that when you do a job with long-term success in mind, even if you don't learn someone else's scripts, you will over time prepare your own. You will just organically start to find yourself phrasing things the same way over and over. The difference between learning a script that someone gives us and then coming up with our own script is that when we learn a different script first, we learn a really powerful way to say it the first time. As someone who's developed scripts over time because I pushed back on learning other people's scripts, I would fumble my way through the first 3 or 4 times I talked about a specific objection or an issue with a client. And then I would realize at the end, why did I just stumble through it and look less educated when I could have learned the words initially, embraced the script, and then really made the most of the power that's in it.
Right.
So I'm a huge believer in scripts. I think that they make a lot of sense. They make us not look bad.
Right.
No fault in that, right?
Right. Talk about the preparation that Keller Williams in particular goes into these scripts. You talked about that in the class in terms of other material. There's a lot that goes into those, right? Can you talk about that? Because I think a lot of people think, it's just some silly script that they came up with. Those things have been vetted and tested over and over and over again. Can you talk about what that process looks like? Because you've been intimately involved in some of those processes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're talking about the 3-step process for kind of script play and script practice.
Yeah, where do these scripts come from? I mean, who invented scripts, right?
People who are way more experienced than us invented scripts. That's what it boils down to.
Exactly.
They've done this enough times. They have figured out a formula that works for them. So I don't ever want to minimize someone's feelings that, these aren't my words. Yeah, clearly they're not your words.
Right.
And they're words that work. So the process that we talk about in Train the Presenter for Keller Williams is to first memorize your scripts word for word. And then after you've memorized it, this natural thing sort of happens where you internalize the meaning of those words and you understand why they were chosen. So after internalizing the meaning, then we can kind of graduate to that 3rd level of customizing the content. So memorize, internalize, and then customize. And what I found for myself and for people that I've worked with scripts and training is that by the time they get to that point where they've earned the right to customize the script, they realize they don't need to. Right. They've said the script enough times where it is very natural for them, and that these are really the best words to convey the meaning that they're trying to convey.
Right.
Memorize, internalize, customize. And I got that from Dave Jenks, who was one of our previous executives, and I'm not sure if he had a source that he cited before that, but I think it's great, and it works every time.
That's great stuff. Thank you. I interviewed, I don't know if you know Dave Norberg. He's an agent down in San Diego. I've interviewed Dave. He came out and did a mastermind. And what's interesting about Dave is he's been doing this for 30 plus years.
Right on.
He is an absolute expert in, calling expireds and FSBOs on the phone every single day. And when I went to call him a few weeks ago when I did this interview, he asked his wife to bring him the expired script. So there's a guy who's internalized, memorized, and customized, and yet he still has that in front of him every single time he makes that call. And he did the same when he came to the mastermind. So, yeah, it's one of those things with new agents that come into the business. And I did the same thing. I fought against the scripts. I thought I have a better way, but what you just said makes absolute sense. So I want to talk to you a little bit, and thank you. I didn't really plan to even go down that road, but I'm glad we did. That was good interaction. I wanted to talk about the importance of learning not just in our business, because it's not just about real estate agents. Talk about the importance as an adult of continuing to learn and continuing to be fascinated with things and continue to learn. Because I know that's one of your passions, right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm afraid you might let the beast loose on that question.
You go, beast.
Yeah, please shape this as you will. I think most of us that have raised kids are currently raising kids, or were recently kids ourselves. We have very fresh memories around our public education system, just education as a whole. And for kids, there's this really weird thing that happens where, because education is compulsory, very often children go to school because they have to, not because they believe that they can learn something there. Not all kids, just a lot of them do. A shockingly high percentage do. Having said that, those same kids will sometimes get out of school and realize that the whole world is their oyster, and that they can learn now what they want, when they want, in their own time. They can go as deep as they want to go, not just how deep the curriculum tells them they can go, and so on and so forth. So, we have a phrase that we use in Keller Williams. It's called being learning-based. And I really believe that our nature as human beings is to be learning-based. And to whatever degree we've had that encouraged or discouraged throughout our childhood is how that can sometimes show up for us later. So statistics that we hear around, I think you'll have to correct me on this if you know the exact number, but I read somewhere something on the order of like less than 10% of American adults read a book every year. And I do believe that a lot of that is also rooted in the sense that sometimes when we're kids, if we're not natural readers or we're not reading about things that we love,
right.
we think we just don't like reading.
Right.
And we carry those things into our adulthood. So, learning for us as human beings, I think, feeds our soul. It is an essential part of growth. I remember, because I was a band geek and you tapped into the American Flute Society thing, right? So growing up and playing music, I remember a guest conductor one time in one of the honor bands that I participated in. He said, you're either progressing towards something or you're receding from something. He was speaking about music, but I think
right.
this holds true for us in life and learning. You're either learning something or you're losing the learning, or option 3 is you're dead.
Right, right.
So, this whole idea of learning and growing, I think, is part of who we are as human beings. It's part of our DNA to
right.
grow and create.
I agree. It's one of my favorite movies is The Shawshank Redemption, and where he says, "Get busy living" or "Get busy dying." I mean, that's pretty it. That's yeah. What's your big why? What drives you? Because you're a busy young lady with a family, and what drives you? What's your big why?
A lot of things drive me, and I think you're asking a question that comes at an interesting time for me that I think sometimes our default answer is, the family. And
right.
I believe that families are important to all of us, and I would say that I've challenged myself to go deeper than that, beyond that even, assuming that we love and treasure our families, as I think all of us do. I genuinely feel a strong pull toward helping women to reclaim their positions, not only in the workforce and to close the gender wage gap, but in some way to kind of author their own destiny, their own future. I could probably speak a little bit more specifically. One of the big projects that I'm working on this year has to do with helping women in freelancing, like helping to launch freelance and micro business, which is 1 to 5 employees. And I think that there's a huge level of empowerment and agency for women when they can dictate their value and their worth. So it's kind of my big why. It's been that way for about 7 years. I've had a hard time getting this project started, but this year is the year.
How much time have you spent thinking about that big why? Because a lot of people don't really, you ask them, they used to ask me, I'm 53, and I just started to discover it maybe 4 or 5 years ago,
right.
To be honest. I mean, I've just been, working my butt off towards whatever, and it got real important to me to figure that out. How much time have you spent thinking? Obviously, it looks like you have. How much time you actually think about it?
I would say that I've spent years studying it, not every day for years.
Right.
But I have definitely, I think at least once a year, I'm in conversation with someone and they recommend a book or they talk about a course or a seminar that they went to, and so I engage in these discussions. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I have seen very, very recently, I think because of the advent of social media and how we're sharing so much on social media, lots of people will say, this is a picture of my kid and this is my big why. Right. And I just think to myself, I love my kid too. I do anything for him right? I really believe that there is another level that we've got to explore beyond that. And again, 7 years ago was when I started noticing that women around me were struggling to transition back into the workforce, sometimes after extended absences, caring for family.
Right.
So whereas they've been doing that big why, they're also not getting a core part of their identity met and formed and reformed over time. And that's when it started in me inspiring a sense of, I think I'm putting it all together, what I'm here to do. And I don't know, honestly, because, the first time that I took Gary Keller's Quantum Leap, which is all about life mission, life purpose, I was, I think, 21 or 22. And at the time, it was a 2-hour sort of evening class that he just started putting together. That was the first time that I had been exposed to that question of a big why. But here I am 20 years later. And I think I'm just now seeing how all the pieces come together. So I've been frustrated for sure for about 10 years that I couldn't articulate what that big why was. And now that I do feel like I've got a better handle on it, I can articulate it better. It also happens to be that my experience level, my skill level, my specialization professionally, they're all falling together to serve that why. And I don't know that that could have happened for me 10 years ago, but it is now, and I'm grateful for it.
That's great. Do you think it's important for people to to really spend some time figuring out what it is, why they're here, not what they do, as Simon Sinek would say?
Yeah, I do think it's always great, and I think that, my biggest lesson personally from it is that it's not like you just go to a class and you figure it out.
Right.
It is really a lifelong exploration, and again, taps into your question earlier about being learning-based.
Yeah.
The more that we have resources to draw from, the more informed all of these things become.
Right. I'm so glad you said that, because it really is a lifelong, in my opinion, a lifelong pursuit, and I think it changes over time too, or it can change. Okay, so I promise to keep it short because I know you're a very busy lady. So I have two other questions that I love to ask. I asked this of Diana Kokoska last week. I got to ask her a question in the PC Mastermind that we did. If you could place a call to your 20-year-old self and give that 20-year-old self any kind of advice on what you've learned in your life, what would you tell your 20-year-old self based on what you know today?
Like the first thing that occurred to me was, you got this. That's it. You got this. I hate to say it. I think I believed that back then.
That's great.
I don't know that I would
awesome.
need to reassure myself. But back then it was based on ambition and just raw energy.
Right.
Yeah, and whereas now I kind of look back and I think I didn't always give myself enough credit for knowing and following my intuition. I would say that, 20 years later, I feel very, very confident in my developed sense of intuition, whereas back then it was more about facts, research.
Right.
Yeah. I don't know.
Interesting. That was a great answer. One other question. So if you have to give me one word, only one word, to describe the reason why you have been so successful to date. What would that one word be? And you only get one. I'll give you two if you have that.
Wow. Well, that's a lot of pressure. It's a short question. I know you're running out of time too. My first thought on that was love.
And expand on that a little bit.
But you only said one word.
I know, but then hey, listen, I'm the Oprah. I'm Oprah.
Right. You choose a car for you.
Yeah.
And for you. I think that, it kind of goes hand in hand with that 20-year-old question is, I don't know at 20 if I felt confident that there was enough love out there to get done all the work that needs to be done to serve all the people that need to be served. And now I think I believe it. I have certainly been the recipient of that love. I try all the time to pass that on and to give the support, encouragement, all of those things to other people around me. But it all happens through that spirit of just generosity and love.
That's awesome. I knew that this was going to be a great interview. You're a terrific human being, and I really appreciate all you do for all of us out here. And again, if you're watching this and you get the chance to take Antoinette's classes, jump on the opportunity. You don't have to be with Keller Williams. You don't even have to be a real estate agent, but just awesome stuff. And you're very genuine, and I really appreciate your time. I know you're busy. You have any closing remarks for our fan base here?
Okay, so first of all, thank you for your preparation to this. I've done a couple of podcasts and interviews like this before, and I appreciate how much lead time you gave and the format that you had, the structure, all of that. I think that's been really helpful.
Cool.
And you're also so generous in continuing to say how busy I am. Let me just say we are all busy.
That is true. That is true.
And we all have choices we can make with our time. And I hope you have some good usable content in here today.
Oh, absolutely. And I know, because people have told me how much they have enjoyed these. And I know this is going to be a very popular interview. So I really appreciate your time. Have a great day. And I hope everything got delivered and you're good to go.
Okay.
All right. See you soon. All right. Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.